Welcome back. House District 72 has traditionally been a pretty reliably Republican district, but nothing is traditional this year. Both sides would agree there's a lot of energy on the Democratic side. You can thank President Trump for that. The question is, can Democrat Margaret Good overcome the numbers? There are 13,000 more registered Republicans in District 72. A poll released just yesterday shows Good with a 3-point lead, but that is within the margin of error. Another question, what impact will Libertarian Allison Foxhall have, and will she siphon off votes from James Buchanan? We are about to find out together, and joining us for more are Jack Brill, Vice Chair of the Sarasota Republican Party, Melissa Howard, President of the Gulf Coast Republican Women's Federation, former Sarasota Democratic Chairwoman Rita Ferrandino, and the last Democrat to win this House district, Keith Fitzgerald. What's fascinating right now is you're all looking at the same numbers, and I could see for the last hour your spirits going up and going down and up again. Jack, what are you feeling right now? We're about to get the first numbers in.
Based on the voter turnout by party, I was very optimistic in the last 2 hours.
And what happened?
I'm watching the actual EV and AB votes actually come in. So when I say that by the number of registered Republicans that turned out, there was over 20,000 that turned out that voted. There were 17,400 Democrats that turned out and voted. There were 6,300 NPAs that turned out and voted. Don't know who they voted for. And now we're watching as the early, because it always, all the absentee ballots they've been going through the machines the last few days, they come out first.
Right, and Rita, what I was told to expect when the results first came in is you might see Margaret Good jump out to a lead because of early voting, but that James Buchanan would catch up because Republicans traditionally do better on Election Day.
Well, I first have to say that Democrats feel they've won just because with this large a voter registration gap, it's really hard when you've got 13,000 more Republicans in a race.
I know, but
that's
in
a
politics,
lot. That's a lot more votes to bring in.
There are no participation trophies, really.
And so we are really thrilled with how well she's held her own in early and absentee ballot voting. She was strong in both.
Melissa, we mentioned off the top that the national mood right now, that President Trump has become a central figure in a lot of special elections around, not only around Florida, but around the country. And that even though he may not be an issue in this particular campaign, you know, as the polls ebb and flow nationally, it has impacts on local races like this.
I would agree, but I think Sarasota voters are very intelligent, and I don't know how much it played into it. I really don't. I was out at the polls for a few hours today talking to people going in, and I really didn't hear even, you know, the Democrats that I spoke to. It really wasn't about Trump. It was about what they felt about the economy, sanctuary city, education.
Right. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the numbers that have just come in. We are seeing Margaret Good out with that lead right now, 54.79% of the vote to James Buchanan's 42.78% of the vote. Allison Foxhall, 2.43% of the vote. But that is really only with a few precincts reporting. Keith Fitzgerald, you are a political science professor by trade and the former state representative. What does that tell you?
It's relatively good news for Margaret Good, and here's why. About somewhere in the neighborhood of 2/3 of the people vote by early vote, about 1/3 vote on the day of the election. Republicans actually turned out very well on day of the election in raw totals. But in the numbers that I was looking at, I assumed that if Good got 8%, it was going to be very difficult for the Republicans to win day of the election by 16%. We have her here now winning by 12% in what appears to be the early vote, and that sets a really high bar for the Republicans and Buchanan to clear to overtake that in the day of election.
But I also, as we all know, we've all been doing this throughout, in absentee ballots, the Democrats win.
There's no question.
Early voting, the Democrats usually win, and our vote comes out on Election Day. And that's we've been very fortunate traditionally in Sarasota to have that happening. So
that's absolutely right.
So as we watch going in, you know, we got to start seeing the precincts coming in. Now, there's only 32 precincts, you know. The other part that's absolutely amazing about this race, if the vote comes in the way it looks at 44,000 votes, the largest special election for a House representative in this 21st century was at 22%. We've broken the 30% barrier, and it's almost like a special congressional election, on this thing.
Two questions real quick. Number one, Jack, we were receiving reports all afternoon that really strong Republican turnout, and Republicans around here are best known for their closing. But if Jack is right and voter turnout is so outstanding, Rita, what does that say to you?
What it says to me is that there's a lot of attention on this race, and I think Sarasota should be really proud that we've had such a great turnout for this House election. People are listening, people are participating.
Melissa, you think that's good for just basically politics, no matter what side of the aisle you're on?
Absolutely.
Right.
Of course. We want to see as many registered voters come out as possible.
Okay, we are just getting warmed up, and we have so much more to take on tonight, and an election in the midst. Right now, we will be back with more after we check the first alert weather, so stay with us. Welcome back to the most exciting night in politics this year on the Suncoast, the special election in House District 72. We have reporter Rick Adams at Republican James Buchanan's campaign rally and ABC 7's Dwayne Lindo at Margaret Good's campaign rally. Let's start with Dwayne. What is the, let's go to Rick first. Rick, how is things going at Margaret Good's campaign headquarters?
Yeah, Alan, good evening. Thanks for tossing to me. And right now, we know it's been kind of a close race, and they are still confident that they can pull this out, the James Buchanan campaign. Now joined by Frank Patty. He is a secretary with the Sarasota County Republican Party. And what is the feeling right now, Frank?
Well, right now, we're cautious, but we believe he can do it. He can pull it out. We think he's the best candidate, and people will recognize that. Hopefully, we've been able to turn out the Republicans to vote. That was the key thing, and we've all been out there, in the field with signs and phone calls and everything else. So that's where our hope is, that we woke them up. I work with the veterans. We had Veterans Coalition voting for him, so that's where we're going with this.
Now, it appears he's down right at the moment. Do you think he can really pull this out? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I think he can pull it out. I think when all the votes are in, it's going to be very close, but I think he can pull it out, yeah.
Okay, and what makes James Buchanan the right candidate to fill Alex Miller's State House District 72 seat?
Well, one, James is conservative, and James isn't stuck in the mud on issues. He will take an issue for the right side of it, wherever he thinks it's proper. He's very knowledgeable and personable. He's a very decent person, which is very important in politics today, because you don't have a heck of a lot of that. But he's a very decent person and will stand up for the average guy out there.
Now, I know we are in kind of Republican-heavy country here in Sarasota and Manatee counties. Is it kind of shocking that the race is this tight?
Well, yes and no. It depends on how many Republicans we got coming out. People tend to go to sleep in an off year or in a special election, and that's part of our problem. So we don't know, how tight it's going to be, and we worry about that, yeah.
All right, well, Frank, I do appreciate your few minutes here, and I hope for you and the Republican Party things turn out the way you're hoping they turn out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, that's Frank Patty. Again, he is secretary with the Sarasota County Republican Party, and that is the latest here. We'll continue to have these results coming in to see how all this plays out. In the meantime, I'm reporting from Sarasota. Alan, back to you.
Thank you, Rick. Now let's go out to Margaret Good's campaign headquarters, and that's where we find ABC 7's Dwayne Lindo. Dwayne.
Well, Alan, just a few minutes ago, you had the crowd roaring. We had like a full house. Pretty much now there's a full house here now. Crowd was roaring when they saw, the statistics, the amount, basically Good is winning. So Good's winning. People are cheering. People are happy here. We're hoping to see Good here. We're hoping to see Good here in a little bit. Hopefully she'll arrive. We'll be able to talk to Good when she arrives. Alan, back to you.
All right, Dwayne, thank you. Let's take one more look at the numbers if we have them on the screen. With 88% of the precincts reporting, we see Margaret Good maintaining a lead over James Buchanan, 52% to 44.6%. Allison Foxhole at 2.95%. That's with 88% of the precincts reporting, and we have some of the best political minds on the Suncoast here right now. And Jack, you know, your emotions have been going up and down all afternoon and into the evening. Is it over?
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely over. When you look at the numbers, the interesting part of the registered Republicans who voted, when you look at James's numbers, that he got about approximately 480 votes. There were 480 Republicans that voted for Margaret. And it looks like, when you look at this, and Keith, you can confirm this, every single vote that Allison didn't get out of the 6,300 NPAs went to Margaret. Because if you look at her, you know, the number of Democrats that voted was 17,470, and she got 23,000.
And Keith, you've been looking at this all afternoon. What are the numbers telling you about Republican we're talking about Republicans crossing over to vote for Margaret Good.
Yeah, so there are three things that I saw coming into this that made me feel really confident. The first thing is that women were voting Democrat, Republican, Independent at higher rates than they usually do in comparison to men. And I thought that was a telling fact. A second thing is that infrequent Democratic voters, people who don't vote in primaries once, twice, the last three, were coming out in big numbers. That means Democrats were fired up. And in these last numbers, it's very clear that there were a substantial number of Republicans that voted for Democrats. Not unusual in this district, but at these numbers, it's incredible.
Melissa, you know, the Republican closing, getting out the vote is so good in these parts here. Are we dealing with a different dynamic this time around?
I don't know. I don't know if people just have fatigue because we're just so overwhelmed with all the politics on television. You know, I do think her being a younger woman played into it. I don't know. I mean, I know Vern gets a lot of Democrats and Republicans to vote for him, so I don't know if people just didn't like that perhaps he's running on his father's coattails. That was a perception. Right. I certainly don't think that, but I'm shocked.
With 100% of the precincts reporting, it looks like Margaret Good has won. 52.717% to James Buchanan's 44.8%. That was Rita over here. You know, Rita, it has been written often that in a normal circumstance, this is a really tough race for Democrats, and it wouldn't normally get a lot of attention.
We're overjoyed. Cannot believe that we carried by this big a margin, and I really think women came out to vote because they wanted to make a statement. We had a women's march here. We had 15,000 women come out of the woodwork to march. I think this is all about women and the women's movement.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, and we'll have more on the House 72 special election in a moment. Stay with us. And we continue our coverage of the House 72 special election. Let's take one more look at the numbers. With 100% of the precincts reporting, Margaret Good will be your next state representative from House District 72. She obtained 52.17% of the vote to Republican James Buchanan's 44.8% of the vote. Allison Foxhall with just a little over 3% of the vote. And Jack Brill, I got to ask you, what does that portend for the future around here? Because if the Democrats can win a district like this, which for the last couple of cycles has not been winnable, people are obviously going to look at the midterms and see what comes next.
I think there's two factors. Very special, special election following, this fall. When we get to November, we're going to have the full base around. And, excuse me, and I think you're going to see this is I'm going to call it a one-off. And it's obviously, I'm not taking any of the way from Margaret's win. She won very fair and square. But I think the special election and the turnout and the interest it got and the amount of money, we should talk about all the money that came in on this whole thing, because this thing is going to be a $2 million race by the time it's all said and done.
You had former Vice President Joe Biden supporting Margaret Good, making robocalls for her. But then again, you had Corey Lewandowski, President Trump's former campaign manager, in town on Sunday rallying for James Buchanan. Melissa, I mean, we have a congressional election coming up and a lot of other state house races. Are you going to come back and try to take this House 72 away from Margaret Good in just about 9 months from now? A lot of questions.
Well, if I have to move to Sarasota, I just was going to sell my condo. I might have to change my mind. But no, like Jack said, I think this was a one-off, and you know, clearly we have some work to do on our messaging.
Okay, let's go out back out to Dwayne Lindo, who is with Joanne DeVries from the Sarasota Democratic Party, the chairwoman of the party. Dwayne.
Well, Alan, it's been a deafening roar here. I can barely hear myself think. But like you said, we have Joanne DeVries here from the chair of the Democratic Party. Joanne, congratulations. What did it take to get to this point?
Well, took a lot of hard work, a lot of grassroots organization. Everybody came together. All the people in this room stepped up and did the work that we needed to do.
Yeah, so talk to me about what Ms. Good did throughout the campaign to get to this point.
Well, the nice...
And just FYI, I think Margaret Good is just arriving, but what has she done to this point?
Yeah, she worked hand in hand. We all came together. We all collaborated. There was no duplication of efforts. She knocked on doors. Our volunteers knocked on thousands of doors, thousands of phone calls around the state, and especially here in Sarasota and Manatee. It's just so exciting. It's a good night in Sarasota.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Thank you. I know you have to go and introduce Margaret Good. But Alan, again, Margaret Good is the winner. Everyone here is happy about it. Back to you.
All right, Dwayne, if you could still hear me, try to get Margaret over to your camera so we could talk to her before we go off the air. Rita, you have presided over the Democratic Party here in Sarasota County through some pretty bad times. The question comes to you, as I've been asking our Republican friends, keep in mind, just the other day, the Cook report changed the congressional district from safe Republican to likely Republican. Do you have aspirations that you could flip that from red to blue?
I do tonight, and I will tell you, when I was the chairman of the party, Sarasota County came within 256 votes for voting for Barack Obama, which was historic here in Sarasota. So we know how to win, and it's all about the crossover of Republican voters. And that's what happened tonight, and I think that we also need to say something about Vern Buchanan's name did not carry his son. And I think that's the interesting part of the congressional is, will that have an effect on Vern?
You know, Keith, Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local. And I know our friends from the Tampa Times wrote today that this race kind of flips that on its head. But is that really true? Is it the national mood, or was it really looking at James Buchanan and Margaret Good?
No, it really does have to do with the national mood. And I want to be clear, not to take anything away from Margaret. She was a fantastic candidate, and she worked her head off, and it was a team effort. But there's no question that the national mood has a lot to do with it, and there's one person's name has to come up, and that's Donald Trump. Democrats have picked up one after another special election around the country in places they weren't supposed to. And I would say...
And it's not a one-off.
And I would say about the one-off thing is that, you know, it's going to happen because Trump is not going to change.
We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment. Our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. Jack, I know you're not happy right now. It looks like the non-affiliated voters went for Margaret Good. You lost some Republican voters who voted for Margaret Good. Why?
I think all the negative messaging on all sides would have had something to do with it. You know, it had a lot of national attention, very unique election, not something that's going to be a bellwether. I will congratulate Margaret Good on her win tonight. She earned it. But November's coming, and I'm sure we'll have another candidate here soon.
But Melissa, is it safe to say that all bets are off? Just because you have the name Buchanan doesn't mean that you automatically win an election on the Suncoast?
Oh, yes, without question. And I would like to congratulate Margaret. I'm in junior league with her. I've known her several years. She's a lovely lady, and you know, we clearly have a lot of work to do. So I'm just shocked that the amount of Republicans that voted for her. Now, I do know, because I've met myself with campaign strategists when I've talked about running, and women automatically have a 10-point lead over a man regardless of party affiliation.
You know what I'm not hearing a lot tonight, Rita, is whether issues carried the day here. Is it the national mood and good campaigning or bad campaigning? What about the issues? Where does that fall in here?
Well, first of all, I definitely feel that it's a wave, and I will say that the GOP playbook, the sanctuary cities, that just didn't play here in Sarasota. Sarasotans didn't buy it.
Okay, so now the next step will be the midterms. Where do the dynamics for this race and other Suncoast races go from here?
The first big winner tonight is Margaret Good. The second biggest winner tonight is David Shapiro, who suddenly becomes a viable and credible candidate in a U.S. congressional race here in the Suncoast.
Okay, very good. FYI, you can watch this discussion again if you want. It's available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, it's expired, just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. When we come back, Dwayne Lindo is working hard through the crowd to get Margaret Good live for us. We'll see if he is successful. Stay with us. Welcome back. The most exciting night in politics this year on the Suncoast, the special election in House District 72. Margaret Good, the Democrat, is your new state representative from the Suncoast. Basically, it was an unexpected victory over James Buchanan, the son of Congressman Vern Buchanan. We have a couple of moments left with our roundtable here. Jack, I would imagine you go back to the drawing board for this House race now. Does James run again? Do you find another candidate to take on Margaret Good in just 9 months?
Those will all be decisions that will be made in the next few days. I think we've got several viable candidates to look at it.
Want to name names?
No, of course not. You know that. James needs to reflect on whether he wants to run again. He may be ready to get right back into it, but we may also have some other candidates also.
Keith, let me ask you this, because we are in the middle of a legislative session right now with about a month remaining in it. Does Margaret Good go directly up there, get sworn into office, and start working?
Yeah, just so you know how this goes for the candidate, is they think they've been through the most intense experience in their life, and they win the election. I did not know that as soon as it's certified, you're a member of the legislature. So you go right up there and you're on the floor and you're voting. She's in the middle of session. So for her, the roller coaster ride is just beginning.
Melissa, you've been involved in support of a lot of Republican candidates on the Suncoast. Do you take a day off and just to regroup, or do you, start talking in the morning about, okay, how do we not only win this seat back, but make sure that we don't lose other seats come November?
Yeah, I think the Republican leaders, we're going to be meeting tomorrow.
Right.
We need to.
And Rita, where do you go from here in terms of, do you try to entice other Democrats into other races
It just got a lot easier to recruit. And Margaret will be heading to Tallahassee tomorrow, I believe. We are on a roll. I think you'll see a full slate of candidates coming from the Democratic side.
Okay. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Jack Brill, Vice Chair of the Sarasota Republican Party, Republican activist Melissa Howard, former Democratic Chairwoman Rita Ferrandino, and Keith Fitzgerald, the former state representative and the former stakeholder in this House race. Margaret Good is talking to her campaign supporters as we speak right now, and coming up at 11 o'clock tonight, we'll have complete coverage from Rick Adams and Dwayne Lindo in the field. So that will do it for now. With 100% of the votes, Margaret Good is your new campaign, your new state representative. Let's take a peek at her right now.
No. You don't get the money.
Our producer's in the house. I used to work for you.
Thank you to Kevin Latta, my campaign manager. And to our outstanding campaign staff. I am so proud and so grateful.
And that is all the time we have for this evening. I'm Alan Cohn. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.